curriculum committee meeting together to order. I apologize for starting a little late. We'll blame Mr. Trask for that. We had a meeting prior to this that ran into this one. We have two pieces today. Our first one talks about academic and career planning. If you remember or know, that is something that we do in our schools, both middle and high school, and I think you guys get down into elementary to do that, according to state legislation. So who's gonna do academic and career planning?
I'm going to start us off.
All right.
Just want to introduce a couple guests that we have tonight
That'd be
first.
awesome.
We have Ashley Wanaker and Bonnie Persiniak, and both rock a lot of things at Lincoln, and one of them is around ACP. We have a third member that does a lot of work around ACP that couldn't make it tonight, and Stephanie Boncher. So I'm going to do the best I can around middle school, and then I'll turn it over to Ashley and Bonnie to talk about high school. So I'm going to start with this document. It should be in the board book. It's the MPSD Middle School Academic and Career Planning piece. And I want to talk about that far left column first, and then talk about kind of the progression from 6 to 8. And so that first cell in the upper left corner, ACP again is academic and career planning. And then Zello is a platform that students get into this Zello account. Each student has their own account. And it walks them through some activities. It's also the platform where parents, students, and staff members can communicate. Then we're going to talk about keys to successful transition and what does that look like, student roles and responsibilities, learning styles inventory, career explorations, academic course planning, and then academic and career planning conference. So those components on the left column there really make up what we consider to be academic and career planning, ACP, at the middle level. I'm not going to read this to you, but I'll summarize and then answer any questions. Questions would go to me, concerns would go to Ashley. At the ACP and Zello part there, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade look a lot very similar at each grade level, but there's layers added. So really we're becoming more aware of careers and then the post-secondary requirements that match those careers, and certainly becoming more familiar with the components of Zello. I think important piece here is that successful transition piece. Looks a lot different at 6th grade than it does at 8th grade, right? 6th grade, we're talking about navigating the school building, learning how to utilize a locker, and the daily tasks of what middle school life looks like. If you fast forward to 8th grade, you're thinking about describing how people who can help you and how you might utilize their help moving forward. Another piece here is roles and responsibilities, really thinking about leadership skills and qualities, and then analyzing when not to take responsibility. What does that look like? Certainly those topics are replicated 6, 7, 8, but again, there's more layers as we go from 6 to 7 to 8. I think the learning styles piece is very interesting. 6th grade, we're identifying subjects that we like, don't like, things that we've had experiences where we struggled, where we had success. You look at the 8th grade level, we're analyzing the impact. So moving up Bloom's taxonomy and DOK levels. Career exploration, again, identifying career interests and goals. There's also events that take place at the 7th and 8th grade levels. The 7th grade level, there's a chamber event for all 7th grade students. 8th grade, all our 8th grade students go to LTC for some touring and exploration. And then academic course planning, again, Sixth grade, you're looking at the variety of opportunities that are available to students at the school setting. If you look at eighth grade, again, we're predicting, right? How we'll use the knowledge from certain subjects in high school and beyond. So we're really doing some upper level thinking there. And then academic and career plan conferencing. Again, between sixth and eighth grade, there's some significant changes in what we do there. Sixth grade, we really think about short and long-term goals. If you look at eighth grade, we're recognizing strengths, applying skills, and making connections. Again, the middle level really facilitated much by our counseling team, but also integrated in by our classroom teachers as well. Any questions about sixth, seventh, or eighth ACP?
I do, Jason. I'm just wondering, could you explain more about Zello? And I'm assuming that that's a software program that they log into, and
It is.
Exactly, do we pay for that every year? What does that look like? I guess I've never actually even heard of it, so
Sure.
I'm just curious.
I think at one point we used career cruisings. That might be something you've heard before.
Okay,
But Zello is a platform that we pay for.
okay,
And again, it provides some activities, guided activities for students to navigate that match some of these varied components. It also provides a platform for communicating between student, family, and school. And it records some of these very things that we're asking to think about. Interest inventories, career plan, academic career plans, what are the courses that I might take at the high school level, and really transfers from middle school to high school and continues there as well.
so is there time set aside that our middle schoolers or even high schoolers log into this? Maybe what used to be called homeroom time, that they might have specific activities? Is that it?
Regularly,
Okay.
yes. Yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Turn it over to Bonnie and Ashley, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. So for the high school, that is this handout. So this outlines what ACP activities and what the learning goals look like at the 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th grade level. So students at Lincoln, they do their ACP during homeroom time. Every Monday is set aside as the day that they go to their homerooms. Their homeroom teacher helps facilitate some of the activities, but that is their time to log into Zello and then complete their lesson for that week. Each of the different grades have specific learning goals. So 9th grade is really focused in more on talking about what are careers, what are career clusters. So if I like one career, what are other careers that also might be of interest to me? Career assessments, so just getting students thinking about what careers might be a good fit for them. All students also have one large event at each grade level. So at 9th grade, it is Career Expo, which is organized through the chamber, where students get to, in a non-COVID year, go to LTC and then hear from industry professionals in career areas that they're interested in. 10th grade expands on that, so then students start thinking about education and lifestyle costs. So depending on what type of career or education I pursue, what are the costs of that? What kind of workplace values do I have? So really starting to think about themselves and picturing themselves in a career and in a workplace. And then the large scale event for that level is Reality Store, which is also through our chamber. So that is an event that helps students think about, they pick a career and then it's a simulation of, they kind of walk through a month of making decisions on housing and groceries and things like that. So really thinking about, okay, if I choose this career, what kind of lifestyle will I have, and budgeting, things like that are in that event. 11th grade, we start talking about, okay, how do we get there? So they learn about personal statements. The large event in that grade is the Wisconsin Education Fair. So learning about what post-secondary education options there are. college admission requirements, job markets, those types of things. And then 12th grade is the level where then we start talking about resumes, cover letters, backup plans. So if your first choice doesn't work out, what could a second choice be for you? Scholarship options, and then students all attend a job fair at that level. So all of the ACP activities at the high school level are coordinated by our ACP PLC team. So that is composed of myself, Ashley, and then our school counselors. So during the PLC time that we have at Lincoln, that is when we're planning these events, we're organizing these things, and we're also looking at data. So one of the great things about Zello is that it lets us look at data, lesson completion data. So we can see by homeroom and by student who is completing the lessons, and then we can use that time to analyze that and do interventions with students and by homerooms. If there are homerooms that are struggling to complete the lessons, we can follow up with the teachers and problem solve and work with our staff to help all students get access and do ACP.
Questions at the high school, or did you have something too, Ashley?
I was just going to talk a little
Sure,
further
go for it.
about some challenges and
I'm
for
sorry.
future. So when we kind of analyze and reflect on our data that we're receiving from Zello, we see some pretty obvious gaps right now. In the past, ACP lessons were done in a different format, so it wasn't all through the Zello platform. It was often either through a shared Google Classroom with staff, or they were lessons shared out via email, and they were more reliant, you could say, on the teacher kind of presenting that information. And so we, got a lot of feedback from our teachers, and it's one more thing that they need to do. So that's why we were really excited to be able to utilize Zello this year as a full online platform where all of the lessons are composed by us and presented by a video. And then may have some follow-up questions that the student responds to within Zello. So really the teacher's end is just going in and they can see if their whole class has participated, if they actually answered the questions the way they should, or if they just put a few letters in there and hit submit. So they're checking the validity of that. So that has helped. But I mentioned, we're seeing some gaps mainly with our 11th, 12th versus 9th, 10th. Our 11th, 12th, this is not something they've always had to do before. So we're getting some pushback on it. Oh, why do I need to do this? I know what I want to do after high school, right? Where our 9th and 10th graders, this is what they're used to. This is what they've had from the start of the school year, and they had it, partially last year as well. So we're seeing higher completion data right now in those grade levels compared to the upper levels. So that's just a challenge we have right now. And just some differences in kind of how we're trying to tackle keeping everybody up to speed, because the topics are very relevant to their grade level and helping them be successful and reach their career goals. Another challenge we currently have is just buy-in from staff too. You see pockets of that as well, where some homerooms are really rocking it and making sure that the whole class is kind of participating and talking about what do you want to do after high school. And then we see some that, just aren't flowing as well. So trying to provide extra support for those teachers between us and counselors going in and reaching out to them as well. So that's been something we've been trying to work on a lot this year with the data. And one thing we still haven't been able to tackle yet is just identifying a plan for makeup opportunities. If a student misses a lesson, they can go in anytime and make that up. But if they miss a large scale event, we don't have a process right now for them to necessarily make that up. Career Expo this year was virtual, so we could make up that opportunity with those students, thankfully, because they were all recorded sessions. But something like a job fair or the reality store at this time, there's not really a makeup opportunity for something like that. So. Preferred future, right now, as I said, buy-in is kind of an issue all around. The why behind it. Our ultimate goal is the ACP is for all students, all staff, all teachers. This isn't a counselor-led initiative. This doesn't belong to one office. This is about relationships and helping prepare students for what's next. So the goal is ultimately that, right now it's happening 6 through 12. The goal would be that it's K through 12. We know that in pockets, conversations and learning is happening at your younger level too, at your younger levels too, about careers and what does mom and dad do when they go to work every day, and what do other parents do for work. But some of those things are happening in pockets and not necessarily the same conversation or level for all. So the goal would be to have it K through 12 in our district, and possibly even a graduation requirement at some point to help kind of put some more teeth to it. I don't think replacing a graduation requirement we have right now, but maybe even kind of piggybacking on like the community service. Community service could certainly be a component of ACP as well. So yes. Any questions?
Yeah, of course I have questions. So don't we have like in high school, like a life ready class where they're doing like checkbook balances and all that kind of stuff? Don't we offer something like that?
There's a financial literacy requirement from the state, so there's a number of courses that have financial literacy components, yes.
I just wonder if something like this could be like in tandem with something like that, because it's all about what comes after school, right? So like you were talking about trying to make it more kind of inclusive at all levels, like maybe that's one of the ways to do it. But one of the questions that I had too, though, was in 12th grade, you have exploring the college application process. And in my mind, most seniors are done with it at that point. I mean, a lot of seniors are doing that in the very, very early part of their school year. So is there a possibility that that backs up? Is this part of Zello or our ACP program? Like to me, it's almost should be backed up even further, like the end of junior year. But obviously you can't cram everything into 1 year. But how does that work then, not addressing those things until their senior year?
Well, we do have, and it's not, the list on here isn't all inclusive, so there's more. These are kind of the main points, what's on the handout. But we do start talking about it at the end of junior year. And the very first lessons of the year for 12th grade hit on college applications to catch any students that haven't applied yet, to tell them, hey, it's not too late, you still can. And here are the ways you still can get to college if that's what your goal is. But we do talk about it at the end of 11th grade year as well.
I would also argue that's a university model where a lot of colleges will take seniors as they're traveling through their senior year.
Right, but I just thought if this was our
Right.
set, you know what I mean? It just seemed like a little late for a lot of those people. So, yeah. I mean, there are people who don't apply until, maybe January of their senior year.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean they
Very
get first
college
dibs.
specific for sure.
Right. So. Well, it sounds like a good program.
Yeah. So how far does this dip down into elementary? You had mentioned to start at K-12. What's the level where it does start right now?
Let's say that it's definitely K through 12.
Oh, okay.
As Ashley said, I think it's, there are pockets at K through 5 versus 6 through 12 is much more systematic. So I would say we're probably going backwards a bit here. I think the high school is far more systematic and far more ingrained in their work. And that's a reflection of many things, especially Bonnie and Ashley. And there remain gaps that we can do things differently better. But the middle level is just a step behind them. And we want to make sure those two pieces are solidified. And then we're going to grow that systematic approach K through 5. Again, there are pieces that are happening.
I would think that a program like this, Zello, too, helps decrease the gaps, because you're not seeing disparity between classrooms as much when you have a program like this, so that everyone is kind of looking at the same thing, then leaving it up to each teacher and how much they project career readiness. I would think that this is much more universal. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, and it's nice because Zello for each grade level 6 through 12, they'll have usually about 4 pre-populated lessons that they feel are very important, but then we can customize and add any that we want. And so, I mean, we have made a ton of lessons, because again, our seniors have a new lesson every Monday. And so it's nice that we're able to customize that. You can also move lessons. So if you think it's really not appropriate for that grade level, you know, we have the flexibility to do that. So we've been very happy with using it. The only, I don't want to say gap, but right now Zello is only accessible 6 through 12. So, you know, that's not something that could necessarily be used at the younger levels at this point. But may be other platforms that we felt the platform was necessary for younger grade levels that we could use.
So this was our first year using this? When did we start the Zello program?
I want to say, don't quote me, but it feels like the 1920 school year. So kind of along with grade realignment. And that school year, as we all know, was the spring when we went to Save at Home. So it's been a challenge, I think. That's just another layer of challenge. But again, I think there's a wealth of resources in that platform. We're just growing the systematic approach to that. I think a huge component of that, as Bonnie and Ashley mentioned, is the data that comes from that, right? And not as I gotcha data, but how do we circle back with folks and either support their implementation of it or meet with individual students about where there are gaps? That data is really powerful.
Yeah, I would think it would really help alleviate like those students falling through the cracks, like, because now you have data from all of them. You know, or if you have those students who are putting, you know, ABC and pressing the button to move next, you might want to connect with them, right? So
It's been a great way too for us to see if, we missed the boat on that lesson. Like
Right.
when we go back and are funneling through and looking at student responses, we're like, okay, we need to make some tweaks, or they really got this lesson. Like, this is great. So that's been really beneficial for us this year as well.
it would be neat in the future just to see what one of those lessons is like as board members, you know, just to kind of, I don't know, it'd be kind of fun to see what it actually looks like. You know, maybe we could all take it. You know, at my age, I need some career planning. Just a thought. So,
I just had a couple questions. Did you guys do any, I know it's set, I don't know if it said assessment, this was sort of like in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade one. I mean, do you guys do aptitude testing and kind of a career assessment for kids as they're transitioning into the 9th, 10th? Like the SDS or self-directed search or, you know, anything like that? And
Zello has some assessments that they do, or that we have, that they do right at the beginning of 9th grade, and they are like skills lab is what one of them is called, specifically based on skills. There's one called Matchmaker, where that one is more of, they answer questions of things they like, things they don't like, and then it recommends certain careers or career areas for the students. So there's several different assessments that are built into Zello that students can take. And then students can also clear the responses out and take it again. So that's something we did this year, where some students had taken it in middle school, but we had them clear it out and take it again, so it was more updated and relevant to who they are now.
do you take, when the student is doing their education plan, course selection, as guidance, are you looking at that Zello data to see kind of where their interests lie and what track that they're gonna go down once they get to the high school area? Like, are they gonna, can we tell, like, by 9th, 10th grade, the kids that are gonna wanna do Rising Phoenix versus, you know, the other programs that we have?
I know that counselors are starting to use Zello when they meet with students, they do sometimes pull it up. I don't know how universally it's used by every counselor, but since this is our first year of having everything in Zello and every student at the high school level in Zello every week, I think we will start to see that more and more where we can use it as a tool. And I know that's also part of future plans, when if we have a guest speaker coming that's speaking on a certain career or a certain post-secondary opportunity, that we'll be able to go into Zello and see, okay, we have someone from UW-Madison coming here, and these are the students that have indicated in Zello that that is a top choice school for them, or we have someone coming from, a plumber coming to speak, and these are the students that have indicated that they're looking to be a plumber for the future. So we are gonna be able to use that data now that we have everybody in Zello and doing those activities. So those are things we'll be able to utilize for the future to help us target students that are interested in specific opportunities.
And then,
Or just add on, I don't know if Zello and the student pieces in there are really funneling to programs like Rising Phoenix. I think it's more about where we see choice in course selection and the conversation is there, right? If I have a choice between some art elective or tech ed elective or foods, Zello can help us say, hey, you showed some interest in the arts, maybe you take this elective. So I think it's more about where you see choice and using this as one data set to help make those choices.
I can tell you from an 8th grader perspective, yes, they took their interest survey, and then when we met with the counselor, that survey information was brought forward, and the student is asked to keep that in mind as they're planning their 9th through 12th grade coursework. And as those conversations, at least in our case, came up, Rising Phoenix and some of the other programs like College Here Now did come up during that conversation based on that interest survey. So those conversations are very actively happening and used at the middle school level to plan the high school career.
I think another important piece is what Bonnie said is not that we clear out every student's data, but it also is not locked in, right? At 6th grade level, it's not locking a student in, it's just getting them to explore and think about the future and aligning those thoughts for some course selections, again, where there's choice. And knowing that, as Kathy mentioned, right, many of us still don't know the career, that path that we're following, right? So we want to encourage students to take a lot of different courses and find where their passion lies. And follow that one. So.
yeah, just one other question. What do you think that the reason for not the buy-in by some teachers?
I think, well, the time, right? It can be often seen as one more thing. And so, as I mentioned, we've been trying to take staff feedback to try to make this as simplified as possible. But when there's not concrete like buy-in from the students, it's hard as a whole homeroom to complete it and for the teacher to say, oh, this is why we're doing it. The teacher is trying to tell them, like, honestly, it doesn't hurt us if you don't do this, but this is for you. This is for you to help figure out what, plethora of options there are for you after high school. This is to help you have a plan, but also understand the other options available if that number one choice doesn't work out. And so, I think it's just some staff are just more comfortable with having those conversations than others.
What percentage of kids do you think are disengaged?
That's a hard question. I don't know if I can even give a percentage, to be honest.
Because it's in pockets,
Yeah.
You said it's higher in the 11th and 12th grade for sure. But again, it's not something that it was an expectation that was expected from the beginning, so.
Okay, well, thanks.
I think that's an important piece at the high school level, especially, is that every 4 years, there's a change of the entire student body, right? So incoming freshmen, when you set the tone and expectation, they don't know any better, right? So they will become sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So that will become the culture and the expectation. Whereas a senior says, hey, I've never done this before, so why am I doing it now? So that's a cultural piece as well.
And I think we really did see that Career Expo this year was virtual. So there were times over 4 days, there were various times throughout the day where we had presentations in the library. And students were assigned to a time based on a career area they chose. And it was up to the students to show up at their time and on their day. And we had very good attendance for that. And that was our ninth grade students. We didn't know exactly what to expect. But attendance was very, very good. So I think we're definitely seeing it with our ninth and our 10th that they have the buy-in and they're understanding why we're doing it. So, I mean, that's been a very positive thing that we've seen. And we definitely have 11th and 12th that are doing it. We're just seeing better numbers in 9th and 10th than we're seeing in 11th.
Any other questions?
I just have one really simple one. Ladies, you were introduced, which I really appreciate, but exactly what are your positions in the MPSC?
So I'm the school to work coordinator, so I oversee the work experience program, help with grants, work a lot with LTC and our partnerships with articulating classes and students taking college classes there.
And then I'm the youth apprenticeship coordinator. So I work with our youth apprenticeship students and our youth apprenticeship program at Lincoln.
Okay, thanks, girls. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome to stay, but we're gonna start talking math, so it's completely up to you.
I'm watching, you know.
Right? Lori's got,
I'm
you
not as
know.
good at math as I used to be.
You've got the wrong tool.
All right, we are gonna move on to a math update. So I guess I'll just give that to Lori. Are you starting off?
I'm gonna start us off, but
Okay.
Lori will definitely help me and kick me when I mess up. So I think it was October when we shared the professional development plan for the school year. And when we got to the math portion of that, there were some questions about the current reality in math, especially at the middle level. And there was some discussion about what would be best for a next step. And we put together some data. And that data was shared, I believe, in November. And we looked at some data, some short-term data, but also some longitudinal data. I think we had 2 years of student data from the middle level, from the forward exam, and then looked at their ACT scores. And when we had that data conversation, again, we talked about next steps. And at that time, we talked about really looking at 4 things. One is professional development. What professional development could we provide at the middle level, high school level, to really support our professionals that work every day with students in mathematics? Then we talked about really defining, we say the word enrichment, but what does that mean and what does it look like moving forward? And then the third piece we talked about is what would a proposed criteria look like for students to be offered the opportunity to be in compacted math. We know that 3 years ago we had some criteria, but it's changed every year since because of the pandemic. And then the fourth thing we talked about is what are the pathways at the high school level that we have now with compacting? What would it look like if we didn't have compacting to allow every student the opportunity at the highest levels of math? And since that conversation, Lori and I have had the great fortune to work with our middle school math coaches. We've shared some updates and received feedback from our middle and high school leaders. And what we have here tonight reflects that work. So I'm not going to read any portion of this, but I'll walk us through it, pause, and Lori has some components. We'll answer any questions along the way. So I really want to highlight 5 kind of components of that introductory paragraphs. The first is that our mission talks about educating, engaging, and inspiring all learners. And that really provides the backdrop for the work. So that has been the forefront of our conversations. In the second or third sentence, I believe, it talks about supporting ambitious and equitable instruction. And when we think about those two terms, we think about really high rigor and challenging every student. That's that ambitious. And equitable, really, when we think about that, we're talking about giving every student what they need when they need it, push them forward. The second part of that sentence talks about nurturing children's positive self-concept and a strong sense of empowerment. So we want to provide classroom environments that provide those pieces for every student. In the second kind of paragraph there, it talks about math knowledge. What that says is math is important. And we debate with Pam and Jen Schultz, our reading folks, not every day, but regularly, about which one's more important. But we know that math and literacy are important. That first sentence just says math is important to our students and our community. The next piece I want to highlight is that in 2010, the state standards reflected an increased rigor level. And that's impacted, I believe, some of the work we're doing now. And then in 2021, we have revised standards that we talked about earlier this year that still represent a high rigor level, but also talks about recognizing, calls attention to students' ability to recognize and appreciate diverse thoughts and approaches in mathematics. How I approach a math problem or math scenario may look very different than how Meredith approaches a math scenario, but there is value in us discussing those different approaches, how we got to an answer. So again, the rest of this piece here reflects those four things that we talked about earlier this year: professional development, enrichment, a proposed criteria, and then some high school pathways. I'm going to turn it over to Lori to talk us through professional development and enrichment. Thank you, Lori.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Well, I'm excited about this. I'm always excited about lifelong learning and the opportunity to enhance the skills that our professionals have. We've had the opportunity over the last few years to work specifically with the math department on growing their skills. But we also know that we've had some turnover in the math department. So we had to look at Andrew and Derek are in the buildings working with those teachers on a daily basis. So their input was really valued as we looked at putting these pieces together. And the three numbered items there are not necessarily numbered in order to say one is more important than the other, but that they're the three components that we would want in a professional development plan moving forward. This also, so when we look at, we want to make sure our core instruction that reaches every single student is as strong as it possibly can be. And the gentleman had specific pieces to that through their observations, through their work with the teachers, they felt could be emphasized in those core instruction strategies. Really beefing up the PLCs even farther to the collaborative lesson planning, focusing on strategies teachers can use to make sure all students are engaged. And then also working on questioning strategies so that teachers are not only questioning for, say, right answers, but questioning to find out how the kids do understand something or what they don't understand so that they can adjust their instruction in the moment. So really looking at those pieces, having a piece to that professional development that may be more specific for teachers who may have compacted classes and how might they need a little different strategies when we're talking about a pace adjustment. And then those teachers that may not have compacted classes, really learning about that enrichment and what that enrichment means. I can stop there before I go to the enrichment, but the enrichment also ties to that. But if there's any questions about that. No?
Let's keep rolling.
Okay, so then the enrichment piece, we really talked Derek and Andrew and I talked about different forms of enrichment. And as we were doing this, you can see again, 4 components to that and making it happen. There's a statement right in that intro paragraph for there that we still need to grow in this area, in the middle schools. And we know that. We've had considerable turnover there. And some of that means that teachers are learning, first of all, they're first-year teachers, right? Then we've got some experienced teachers that we've hired that really do know the math. They need to learn the resource and the CPM and the order that things are taught and which connections are going to be made when. So we have that piece as well. So we know that because of that, and because we haven't dedicated a lot of time to teaching teachers how to enrich things, and over the last few years, we haven't taken extra time to develop those components. When I worked with Derek and Andrew, they put together a sample unit that we could show to the teachers about so the teachers could envision that enrichment and how often it could be put in. So they put a month calendar together, put lesson numbers in it, put specific links to this enrichment could happen with this lesson. This lesson already has challenge problems right in it. And then what we need to do is you go back to that PD and how do you make that happen? Get your core instruction done and have the enrichment available for those students who need it. So that's how those tie kind of together. Any questions about that?
How soon can we get that rolling? Are you looking at next year? Are there some things they can begin to experiment with this year as far as deploying some of those enrichment activities within the classroom
That's a
for
good
current
question.
students?
Yeah, as Laura mentioned, Derek is the math coach at Washington. I think it might be behind me. And then Andrew is the math coach at Wilson. So those pieces are really being fleshed out. But they envision bringing a team together this summer to develop the calendar with more certainty and month to month or unit to unit, and then really pushing that out for the whole team for the start of the year. Any other questions to this point? Just gonna turn our attention to a proposed criteria. Again, this comes with the input and recommendations from a great number of people. Number 1 talks about we look for advanced scores and 80% or more of sub-scores on previous school year's performance on forward exam. And along with that, we look for advanced scores in all 5 of the subcategories in mathematics on the current year forward exam. So for example, this year we'll have all students take the forward exam through 8th grade. This year's score, we look for advanced scores in all 5 of those subcategories for next year. And then the students that meet criteria 1 and 2, we'd like to give MPSD comprehensive math assessment and look for an advanced score 85% or higher. And then we've talked about this in the past, that mathematics interest and attitude survey, a 3.34 or higher score on that. Students that attain those 4 criteria would be offered the opportunity to enter the compacted math. We did have some nice conversations about teacher or parent recommendation. Really wanted to remove the subjectivity of those and really look for these pieces, knowing that we would set students up for high school and ACT success. These are some markers. I'm going to turn it back to Lori for some pathway pieces.
Okay. So the next, the bottom of page 2 and then the subsequent pages all have different pathways that you could take as a student in the MPSD beginning with sixth grade. These are all the pathways that already exist. They have always, well, they've existed since for the last 20 years. I know that for certain. So I think it's easier to see if they're in the labeled categories. The Lincoln High School Bulletin has a chart, well, it used to have the chart, Kathy would remember, with all the arrows. You could go from here to here to here to here to here to here, like all of that. So I just thought, okay, the typical pathway is one that gets you college and career ready. You may not be particularly passionate about mathematics, but you need an important amount of mathematics to be successful in life and regardless of the career pathway or where you're going post-secondary school. And that would take you through Algebra 2 as an absolute, or math applications as an absolute. You have to have 3 credits of math to graduate from high school in Wisconsin, and 12th grade options, that if you want to have a 4th year, you could have that 4th year. If you look at page 4, we currently have a compacted pathway where the compacting happens in the middle school. Some students are ready for that kind of pace and intensity at that level. Some kids are not. So we have currently a compacted 7th and 8th grade where they do 7th grade, 8th grade, and algebra in 2 years instead of 3. And that's the data that you saw in November, where we pulled that data from. That pathway has existed for quite a while and has stayed the same in spite of the rigor change in the standards in 2010. And then on page 5 are the accelerated pathways to get to those same high levels of courses by accelerating in the high school instead. Because sometimes you need middle school to, first of all, figure out you're passionate about math, or that you want to go into a math-related field, or to just make sure your foundation is super, super strong before you go into that accelerated and that extra challenge as you're moving forward. So those accelerated pathways, I think the change in what you see here as to what you would have seen 2 or 3 years ago is the Rising Phoenix is on here versus International Baccalaureate or IB. So we've changed some programming a little bit, but we have always had some really nice high-level, college-level courses at Lincoln, the opportunity for students, and we continue to have that. We're excited about that.
So instead of compacting at 7th or 8th grade, if I wanted the opportunity to just take 7th grade math, 8th grade math, I could compact algebra and geometry at the 9th grade level and still be in the same spot in the end, my senior year, as if I had compacted in 7th and 8th grade.
Or you could wait till 10th grade and compact the algebra. If you don't want to use 2 class periods for mathematics and you still want some other electives, you can do that compacting in 10th grade with the algebra, or with Algebra 2 pre-calculus course, and that works as well.
Just to clarify, Meredith, I think you said compacted at 9th. It's not compacting there, it's concurrent. So you're taking 2 math courses.
Okay.
Versus what Lori just said at the 10th grade, the far right column, grade 10, that is a compacted, the algebra 2/pre-calc.
Okay.
Yep.
So compacted will then be eliminated? Is that what you're proposing?
No, we're not proposing.
I mean, in the 7th and 8th grade, it will
We're
not
not
be available.
proposing.
We're not proposing that.
So it will still be made available in the middle school.
I think we're having that discussion about the future of compacted for the team, yes.
Great, okay.
There's no proposal here other than the criteria.
So guys, what kind of prerequisite will there be then for those high school level courses? Like you said, like say compacted for sophomores.
It's a choice.
It will be choice at that point. Okay.
Just to clarify, the pathways on page 5 are in place now,
Okay.
right? So this is not a proposed, this is
It's happening.
opportunities for students right now.
Okay. I do have some concerns. As you know, when you brought us the information in November, I found the information really startling, and it was evident to me that there are some solid statistics out there for some of the choices that you guys are making. But there is a part of me with the what portion is this? The proposed criteria that perhaps we're being somewhat too stringent. It's not just all data. There needs to be human factor in this too. And I guess I think some of it back to just my own experiences and knowing an experience or two that's out there currently. And I'll just give you a short version. When I was in grade school myself, I was very advanced in math. Something happened in our family's life that I had to go to a different school. So at that time, I was in 5th grade, and I had to repeat many of the things that I had already learned, and therefore fell very, very behind because I was bored out of my mind. And I'm concerned about some of the students who are kind of like in that right now, because this is like a transition program. And not everyone shows interest. This is another note, I guess. Not everyone shows an interest in math. I mean, as a person who loves the arts, I would have never have said I was interested in math, but we all know how important math is. So I just, I do have some hesitancy on making such a stringent criteria for our students to enter into that compacted math. That there's certainly, it seems like there ought to be some sort of human approach to this too, between teacher and parent. And maybe that could be coupled with it. I don't know how that could be worked out, but I hate to just do everything based on just data. And it's just such a narrow pathway that certainly there are those students who are kind of like the outliers of that, that maybe should be included. I don't know. I hesitate about this particular criteria being the only criteria to allow our students in those areas. But I get those statistics. I mean, those are back in my mind from November. I guess I'm confused about that myself,
Yeah, there's no
response.
doubting. Yeah, appreciate it. The criteria is stringent.
It
There's no
is.
doubt, right?
Yeah.
And it is based on that deep dive into data. And so I appreciate it. I would also say that we can't lose focus of a comprehensive professional development plan, really focusing on tier 1 instruction, that core instruction, but also layering the pieces around compacting and the strategies there, along with enrichment. So I think you're seeing a robust, comprehensive look at professional development, coupled with chart 5 really shows opportunities at the high school level, right? Page 5 chart shows we have these pathways for students to get to higher level mathematics courses. And there at the high school level, it's really choice based. And so if we're confident that we support our professionals and their practices, we really set the foundational skills in mathematics, K through 8, that the doors do open up for our students.
Yeah, I am concerned for those individuals like currently right now though, who may, like in my case, fall behind then because of, they think they're ready and they're not, and then it becomes unimportant. And the one area that I struggle with the most is the mathematics interest and attitude survey. Not everyone looks at math positively, just like any subject. So I hate to see that we have to have an interest or an attitude toward math positively in order to get into that some of the coursework. I feel as though there should be maybe more latitude in that area. And again, I'm just drawing on my own experience.
I think that goes back though to some of the research done on growth mindset and grit and motivation, that if you don't have a motivation for it, you could be as smart as a whip, but if you don't have motivation for it, you're not gonna do as well. So I mean, I think it needs to be a component.
I don't know. I could use my son as an example for that.
Well, I think
You know,
too that,
It's just,
right, one of the reasons that Derek and Andrew, and others have suggested that we also have that interest in math is because once you're kind of in that pathway, right, we don't want you to stop taking math before you graduate. There's that requirement of 3 years,
sure.
right? But if you're going to be in an accelerated pathway, we really want you taking 4 years of mathematics. And if you don't have a lot of interest in it, then it's easier to say, well, you know, I got my 3rd credit, I got a C, it's all good, but then you don't have any math before you take your placement test. You may or may not, you know, get into the core class that you want at a university or at an LTC level. In fact, I did put the asterisks there that those foundational skills of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will also keep you out of the math classes for the Rising Phoenix, right? Because you have to pass the UW math placement test to get into into that Rising Phoenix math course. And we have had students who have not passed that, and then they have to go back to the Lincoln classes again, rather than take a university level course. So we do want to make sure that that foundation is really, really strong, because it's the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math that makes up the foundational math portion of that UW placement test, as well as the 0 to 22 points of the ACT. So we just want to make sure that all students have that truly, truly strong foundation in pre-algebra and all of the standards around geometry and measurement that go with that.
The criteria that you guys listed here, the proposed, is this the same one that you've used for this school year?
No.
Is this lowered from that?
It's different
It's
and
different.
more components. So this year we looked at, initially we looked at 5 components of the forward exam from the last forward exam. And we wanted, to remind me, Lori, 2 of 5 to be advanced, and the other one proficient. And then we looked at the interest and passion inventory.
Was there, on the forward for this year, was that number higher? Was it closer to 90, or was it always 80?
We didn't have the previous years in there. So this criteria is really looking at making sure that you have a foundation in all of the standards prior to the ones that you're going to accelerate through. So it's got the previous years. So thinking 4th and 5th grade have a predominance of content around fractions and ratios and proportions in their basic sense, where 6th grade is going to start with the equations and pieces that are a little more algebraic, as well as going into rational numbers, negative numbers, irrational square roots, those kinds of pieces. So we added that you gotta know your fractions. You gotta be solid in all of that and how it applies to measurement, how it applies to geometry when you're finding volume, area, those kinds of pieces, and then the 6th grade piece as well. So that's added because we just want to make sure that they're really ready to go at that pace.
So why is it then that we're going from 2 out of 5 advanced scores to all 5? I guess I'm thinking, why can't we have continue the 2 out of 5 as long as the other areas are proficient and no one falls below that.
We didn't teach all 5 last year.
So if you didn't teach all 5, how can they be advanced in all 5 moving forward?
That's why it's an 80% on the
But
previous
number
year's ones.
2 is advanced course in all 5 of the subjects
But we are teaching this year, all of them.
this year.
Yeah, this year we're doing all the standards.
But again, Lori, I say, so if they are advanced in some of those areas but proficient in others, isn't that an indicator that there is some students who are more advanced than others who could handle, say, the compacted math program if they so chose?
I guess I look at it, Kathy, as when we started compacting the 6 or the 7, 8, 9 together, that was prior to the 2010 standards. The 6th grade standards or the 5th grade standards, the 6th grade standards, the 7th grade standards, and the 8th grade standards were all the same almost. There was only 20 to 40% new material every year after 5th grade. So that whole middle school was like repetition. It was like banging your head against the wall if you mastered it in 5th grade. There were some students who needed that additional repetition because we didn't have the research about how kids best learn math. When they revised the standards, we changed it so there's 0 repetition. So now they have to master each year's worth of content as they're going through it. There'll be relationships and it'll build on that. So there's absolutely the opportunity for teachers to review for students who may have lost some learning for any number of reasons and make those connections and scaffold it in so that they can be at grade level. But the material they're going to learn the next year is new and it can be enriched and it can be challenging and it can just provide this really depth of understanding without slowing kids down, without having that repetition because the standards are different.
So when, for example, we have a current 7th grader going through, say, the regular math course and is stating that, well, I've seen this before, say in 5th grade, like you're saying, that there's repetition. What you're telling me right now is that 7th grade will build on that material, but it's not that they're really being taught the exact same thing. They're actually just building on what they've already seen before. Just the fact that that person may be recognizing that doesn't mean they're not learning something new. Is that what you're saying? Okay. I think you can understand my struggle with some of this. So,
absolutely.
especially because you know my background, and I know so many students who have gone through the compacted math at the middle school level and are very successful in that area. So I do really struggle. I go back to November and I was startled by the data. Yet at the same time, my own life experience shows how successful students can be with a much broader group of students in that compacted math.
I really think we have to think about what we deem success too, though, right? Because our data that we looked at does not have a whole ton of kids scoring 30 or more at the ACT. And we should be. We have a whole ton of kids in pre-calculus when they take the ACT. And there's no pre-calculus on that ACT.
I would tell you, Kathy, that your struggle is shared with many,
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
Everyone is founded in the first sentence here, right? Working to educate, engage, and inspire. So these are tough conversations, and we want to make sure we're putting every student in a position to be successful when they graduate, as they navigate K-12, but also beyond. And that longitudinal data was eye-opening for many people, including myself. So is the criteria stringent? Absolutely, absolutely. Are there things that we can take back to the team from this conversation, the math code to the principal? Absolutely, we will. But we want to do it better for our students. And I don't think there's anyone that doesn't want to do that.
I think it's really important, at least is for me that, and I know we've touched on this almost every time we talk about math, and that is that, and I know you're talking about not getting rid of it, but just that a compacted math program still is in existence and plans to be for that middle school level, because there are those individuals who really benefit from that, and it's very, very important too. And I know, I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way on the board level. So, you know, I don't want to take things away from the kids. I want to give them more opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, a great question, right? There is no proposal to remove compact. The proposal is getting really laser focused on criteria to identify the right students to ensure their success, right? Knowing at the high school level, page 5 again, there are other opportunities to get to the highest levels of math without compacting at the middle level. So.
Yeah, that's an important piece for students and families to know for sure.
Absolutely. And again, I think we talked about it, I know we talked about it in November, is that we can do a better job of communicating the criteria up front. And so when we say, yes, this is the criteria, I would like to take this feedback, conversation back to the math coaches and building leaders. Once we say, yep, that's the right criteria, we will go on an advertising campaign to make sure students and families know of the criteria.
Yeah, very important, I think, at the 6th grade level more
Absolutely.
than anything, right? Because I think starting in 7th grade is when they're looking at this kind of
Absolutely.
coursework. So, and you know, the other portion of this is just making sure that our teachers who are teaching compacted math, you know, I have some concerns about what happened this year in the small group of people and then when that was being taught, and just putting, you know, like that didn't seem like it worked very well about the person who had to teach it and the time, like when she had to. So, you know, I'd like to see that be its own class, regardless of if we have 3 or 30 kids in there. You know, I just feel as though those students who are in that position, they deserve to have the full attention of a teacher. I know what it's like to teach 2 courses at one time, and that is a serious struggle. You can't give anybody the attention they deserve. It should be 100% to each group. So, you know, I hope that can continue.
And we know that, you know, Lori and I have on our to-do list to talk to Mark and Joyce about the staffing implications of whatever decision is made. We also know, I know, and remind myself often, that we have to give grace to our students, our teachers, and our building leaders, right? We are navigating, people say, unprecedented times. So, again, we could have done a better job of communicating criteria last year. We could have done some things differently last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But let's give ourselves some grace. And we're sitting here in January talking about this versus May. So I feel better about the spot we're in now. And the conversations are open and honest, and we'll be better for it.
Yeah, I really appreciate your saying, like, we could have done certain things better, and we're learning from this, just like our students learn, right? And going forward and changing it up. So perhaps it's just the PR, but that is an important thing, especially when students and parents are concerned.
And I think, you know, when we hear from parents, I think one of the biggest things to be able to communicate is your student can still end up at those highest levels.
Right.
It may not happen here, but it can happen here, here, and here. And to me, that's really important. We're learning along the way, but yet we have a system that still allows the same outcome in the end.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Any other questions, math related, from what you've heard tonight?
What we will do is bring, you know, some of the feedback and conversations back to the math coaches, and we'll bring it back to the team.
Okay. All right, those are the items on our agenda. If someone would like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Just
Thanks,
logistical piece, we made the decision not to have the minutes in the full board tomorrow, but the minutes will be in the next board meeting.
That's nice.
Okay. Yeah, it's really nice. Great for the meeting for sure. But I appreciate your backing it up until this week, guys.
Yeah,
So thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. No?
Lori, I'm really curious